welcome back to my garden. I'm Tiffany Benson, one part of Team Benson, and today is going to be a two-part video. I say that because you'll see me in the same outfit. I've had a lot of questions about how my garden is progressing. So a lot of people have asked me to do a garden tour. So as you can see, I pulled back all of the shade cloth, and that is the plan for this morning. But there's also a couple of things that I want to get done in my garden that a lot of people have asked me how I fertilize my garden. And I rarely do a lot to my garden because I've worked a lot on my soil health. So the health of my soil takes care of a lot of my garden. But there is one part of the year that I do something. So in part 2, I will take you guys along on what it is that I get and what I do. So before I leave, I'm going to show you guys the garden, and so that you guys can see how things are coming along and see how things are progressing. I'm going to get started with this first bed, which is where my Swiss chard and my kale live. And as you guys remember, I've been having a hard time getting those to really get going because I've been using a thicker shade cloth while I waited for my actual shade cloth to come in the mail. So I'm going to show you what I mean. So this is the normal shade cloth. As you guys can see, you can actually see through it. So sun is now getting through this. So now when we look underneath here, let me clip this, we can see that things are starting to really take off and grow again because now they're starting to get the sun that they need. Especially these kale plants, they are now finally setting off a lot more leaves and starting to grow a little bit taller because they're actually able to get more sun. So I'm gonna add a couple things to this bed to give it a little bit of a boost, and then it'll be ready for the rest of the summer, which good luck kale plants and Swiss chards, because it's gonna be in the hundreds again. So one of the things that plagues the desert gardener is finding that balance between shade and enough sunlight for the plants, because plants do need sun to grow. Like, they definitely need that light to photosynthesize, but the harshness of the heat in Arizona can really burn those plants. So we're gonna go into the next bed, and then I'll show you kind of what's been growing with there, because since we've been down in the 90s during the middle of the day, I've been able to give a lot of these plants more sun. Now granted, a lot of times it's a little bit hotter, and yes, they wilt a little bit before, you know, even sometimes I have to give them a little bit of extra water in order to get them through the day, but they're starting to green up a lot better. Now, a lot of the problems in this bed could be solved with just getting this type of shade cloth, but some of the things I'm going to be planting in here for the rest of the summer aren't going to need a shade cloth, like my corn. My corn is perfectly happy just being in the sun. In fact, I don't actually put the umbrella up to where it covers the corn, so this little spot in my garden is actually in full sun. So it does get a lot of sun, and it's making the corn happy. So you could see this corn plant is a lot greener. Now the thing with corn, guys, is that it has the weakest roots ever. So you see how that one is already trying to like topple over. One of the things you want to do is kind of just support your corn. Planting it in blocks versus just one single row will help that. And if you see it tilting, sometimes I just add like a little stick to kind of help give it some support. But during the monsoon season, you guys will notice that once this corn gets really tall, I'll actually rope it off to give it extra support during the high winds. So the collards are gone. These beans are just about done. I'm actually going to go through and pick these beans today and get rid of these bean plants. I'm just going to cut them at the bases because beans will release nitrogen in the soil once they die off. And I'm getting this area ready for the mystery plant that I'm going to be planting. So the herbs are doing good. I took out some of them and dried them, and I added another oregano that I had started inside. This one is a Greek oregano, so this one's getting big enough to where I could bring it outside now. And then this mint plant I got from the store, so this one is doing good. We love a lot of mint, so I need to plant more mint because we're going through it. The rest of it, I'm trying to get this oregano to flower. It's slowly trying to do it so I can collect some seeds. And this oregano I'm trying to get to flower, and this time I'm trying to get to flower too as well. Because since I have a lot of it dried, I have time to collect some seeds from it. So we still have our little planters going. I have some flowers going in there. I took a lot of the dead leaves, the burnt leaves, off of this strawberry plant, and it's coming back a lot healthier. My chamomile is doing crazy, so I've been collecting flowers that I'm drying for my tea. And then these ant mollies aren't as big as my other ant mollies because they're not getting enough sun. So I will be moving this one and letting them get a little bit more sun too as well. But the thyme is doing well. I'm going to start pulling a lot of this so that I can dry it, and then the chives are doing really good too. Now this is what I mean by the plant's not getting enough sun. See how light this squash plant is? It's not as green as a lot of my other squash plants that you guys will see in the other beds, because this one doesn't get as much sun, so it's almost white. So what I've been doing is, even though it's not liking a lot of the heat, I've been letting it get a little bit more sun until it hits about around like 90 degrees, and then I put it under shade and it perks back up. But when it's 90 degrees, guys, it looks like it's wilting and dying. The tomato plant is also appreciating the more sun that I'm giving it, so that one's coming in nicely. Artichoke's doing well, and the sage is doing ridiculous. This side of the bed too also doesn't get a lot of shade because the umbrella doesn't cover that much of it. So sage is a plant that I guess is doing really good in the desert, guys. So if you're looking for a plant to herb to grow, sage is it. Now the basil also is a plant that likes the sun. So this one I do give a little bit of shade to, but for the most part it's right next to the sage, so it's getting just the same amount of sun as the sage is. And as you can see, we have been giving this basil a beating, and it is just coming back relentless. Now if there is one herb that me and Mr. Benson enjoy and love, it is basil. We will eat basil just straight off the plant, and we've had so many caprese salads, it has been ridiculous. So if you guys ever want to know like a good recipe for basil, all you do, oh look, let's see if I can get the hummingbird, guys, they're so pretty. Okay, so a hummingbird flew right in front of my camera, and I was trying to get the camera around so you guys could see her, but I didn't. But basil, we take a layer of tomatoes, so you just slice a tomato in half, or a chunk of it, and then put a slice of mozzarella cheese, and then leaves of basil on top, and put balsamic and some salt and pepper on it, and it's the most amazing thing you ever want to eat. Like, we could eat that every single day. And with all the heirloom tomatoes that I have been growing, and the ones that I got from the farmer's market, we've been in a lot of tomatoes. So this little area has been doing so amazingly well. Look at all of these red tomatoes, guys. So I've been saving these tomatoes. I'm not going to use these in my spaghetti sauce because I'm saving these for salsa. So they're nice and red, so I'm going to go through and collect them all today and put those in my salsa, because I also have one more jalapeno that's ready. And look, guys, I grew one single strawberry so far. I'm pretty sure it's ready, so I'm gonna pick it and see what it tastes like. I'm pretty excited about that. And I've started putting in the 2 okra plants that I had here. So this one's in, but this one's not in, because I'm really curious as to what's going on with this cabbage plant. Now, since it's hotter, all of the cabbage loopers that eat the cabbage are gone, but it's starting to look like it's gonna try and create a head, and I want to see if it'll happen. So just purely based off curiosity, I haven't planted this okra plant, which If anything, I could put it in a bigger pot and let it give it more time, but okra's really forgiven with when you transplant it, so it'll be fine, and hopefully it'll be fine enough for me to see what actually is going on with this little thing. So this shows a lot of the difference with having shade cloth and not having it up right away. So this one didn't get shade cloth as quickly as that one over there. So that one over there is doing really, really well. The leaves are happy. Over here though, the leaves they're coming back, but as you can see, there's a lot of sun skull there. The tomatoes are still doing fine on it. They're growing, and since I put in some eggshells and different things like that, the plant has gotten a lot greener since I buried the little pile of goodness right here. So it is helping, but since I'm not putting anything other than just food scraps, it is going to take a little bit longer for that plant to get healthier. It also is helping this runner bean situation that I have going on. This runner bean is not happy about these high degree temps, but it is really enjoying this new shade cloth. So as you can see, the leaves are starting to really green up on it. It's starting to even grow like a couple of like little flowers, and it's starting to fill in. So I'm hoping that maybe I can save it and maybe it'll last throughout the rest of the summer. Now this beautiful thing, guys, have you ever look at how gorgeous this is. I love this plant, and it is my patty pan. It's starting to put off some flowers, and it is just growing so nice and healthy. Next to it we have another squash plant. I forgot what this one is, but there's another one, and then there's my cockazel, or grazini, sorry. This one is a cockazel, this one is a grazini. And as you can see, I need to water these guys, so they're a little wilted right now, this one and the cucumber back there. But I love this one because it has gray leaves. So when you look at them, it's like my only squash plant that is just like a bright silver gray. And then we have the Armenian cucumbers that have made their climb. They're going to continue to climb all summer long, which is going to be really pretty. And the midget cantaloupe too is starting to really fill in. As you can see, the bottom's pretty full, and then it's making its climb all the way up. So I've decided, with all of you guys' votes, to let this little sugar baby grow in the ground and kind of see what it does as it sprawls out. So we'll see what that looks like in the weeks to come. So in my last video, guys, I talked about how I didn't prune my squash plants. Now, when it comes to me gardening, I do a lot of things based off of how my grandma has taught me to garden. And I know there's a lot of methods out there that people use and different things, but when I suggest something to you guys, it is based off of my experience and my grandmother's experience. Now, I know pruning your squash plant is something that you can do. I just personally prefer not to, and I prefer to let the squash plant prune itself. It's one of my only vegetables that I find that really can kind of take care of itself. It bushes out when it needs to, it gets rid of leaves when it needs to, and it really is one of those plants that kind of protects itself. So only if it has some extreme case of like powdery mildew or something like that do I go in and take off some of the leaves. Until then, I just kind of let it do what it's going to do, and instead of cutting the leaves, I let them dry up. Now, that is a personal preference. So, you know, I had a lot of people say like, no, you can prune plants, you can prune your squash plant, and yes, you can, but I would prefer, since those leaves, those stalks are hollow, just to kind of let that plant take care of itself. So just wanted to point that out there to let you guys know that, you know, a lot of my gardening is going to be a personal preference, and it's because I've had the experience with doing it a certain way, and that experience not going right or causing me issues, and then my grandma saying, well, why are you doing that? Why don't you just do this? So just wanted to put that out there to let you guys kind of know that. So guys, look at these okra plants. This one I think is almost done. I'll probably pick this one later on today. But all of these okra plants have little baby okras on them. I couldn't be more happier because I can taste the gumbo now. which is one of the things I love doing with okra. And I got some new flowers, which I think are beautiful. I never know the name of flowers. I just grab them because I think that they're gorgeous and I think that the bees will like them. So got some new flowers for the garden. This one is doing really well too. I've been pulling beans off of this one a lot, so I need to come in and grab the rest of those and maybe they'll sprout some more. We'll see. Now this part, guys, this worm compost bin is doing its job. This squash plant is looking amazing. Well, this squash plant is looking amazing, and this cucumber plant is looking amazing. We're gonna go in on the back side of this so that you can see all the little baby cucumbers that are coming in, and this squash plant is really giving me some squash. This is a big one right here that I'm waiting to yellow up a little bit, and then I'm gonna pull that one. Now I am having a couple of issues with blossom end rot, and it's only been on a few of them, but in tomorrow's video I'm gonna talk to you guys about that and address that. But otherwise, I have a lot of squash. The other thing too I want to talk to you guys about is ants, and we're gonna take a pause so I can talk to you guys about ants. Okay, now guys, I know ants can be horrible little creatures, especially when you have ant beds in your garden and you have fire ants in your garden. I have lived in the South, I've lived in Kentucky, and fire ants hurt. But when they're kind of just in your garden, ants are also pollinators. A lot of people don't think of ants as pollinators because they do support aphids. So when you have aphids in your garden, the ants will kind of have like a symbiotic relationship where the aphids produce sweet nectar that the ants eat, so the ants kind of take care of the aphids. But not all the time is that the issue. Sometimes your ants just like squash plants, and the squash is a little bit sweeter to them from what I read, and I've actually tasted some squash leaves to test out that theory, and they are a little bit sweeter. So the ants are been pollinating my squash plant. I haven't had a lot of bees here in the city, and having my garden covered I think has deterred a lot of bees too as well. But the ants have been stepping in to kind of pollinate things. So a lot of my squashes and a lot of my cucumbers, which are the only two plants that I really see the ants on, mainly the squashes. I actually don't really see them that much on the cucumbers, a few here and there, but that's how the plant has been getting pollinated. So instead of me going through and like mass destructuring these plants that are very, very healthy, and these ants have been on these plants this entire time, I'm just gonna kind of let the ants do what the ants do. And they do add some benefit to the soil too as well, because they create little tunnels in the soil. So I'm gonna let them do it, and unless they are destroying the plant, which will then mean that the plant's probably unhealthy if I'm getting aphids on it, I'm gonna just continue to let nature take its course. Speaking of nature, I was having the hardest time focusing because this little guy is getting breakfast. It's so funny, he just hops down and eats everything. My poblano peppers are doing amazing underneath their little shade cloth. They're getting so big and so tall, and they're filling out, and they're not getting sick, which is sometimes can be hard in Arizona, is keeping your pepper plants from getting black leaf spot. So these ones are staying healthy. I trimmed the bottom leaves like in the last video to make sure that the water isn't popping up on them, and I've been topping them off with compost just to give them extra food. My mighty crop is continuing to do amazing with this squash plant, guys. It is just allowing this squash plant to fill out and grow. I'm actually so excited to see what it's going to look like when it gets to the very top, because this is just beautiful. And it's filling it out to where it's like kind of covering it, so it just looks like I have this tall cucumber plant. So remember, we do have a promo code. I will leave it down below so you guys can get your 10% off. Okay guys, so another thing I want to talk about are my bean plants. Now these plants were going through it with the sun. I mean, like sun skull everywhere. But after getting this shade cloth and covering these plants and just giving them some water and some time to be out of the Arizona sun, and I think it going down to like 95, 99 degrees kind of helped too, but it really allowed the plants to green up. So I see a lot of people, especially on Facebook groups, that are in other states, and they're like, what's going on with my plants? Because they have sun skull all over the plants, and they're like, what kind of fungus is this? What kind of disease is this? It's not a disease, it's not a fungus, it is literally just the sun giving your plant a sunburn. And by covering it with the shade cloth, you don't need to do anything to it. You can prune the leaves off of it. It's more cosmetic than anything. It's not really harming the plant. As you can see, I've left a lot of the leaves on and let them naturally fall off to kind of fertilize the soil, but it's not something you have to do. But providing it with the shade cloth is going to be your cure for things. And I wanted to really point that out because a lot of people, when something goes wrong in their garden, they instantly go to sprays. Like I was looking on some of the responses and they're like, it looks like a fungus, add neem oil. Neem oil would have been horrible to add to those plants when they're already getting burnt up by the sun. So, you know, kind of think, what is actually happening to the plants? Does it feel hot outside? You know, is there something crawling on it? And why? Does your soil look dry? Like, can you put your finger into your soil and pull it out and it just feels like dry sand? Because that's an issue. That means there's a watering issue. So look at the obvious things before just kind of adding a bunch of stuff to them. I don't add anything to my plants other than just a little bit of, well, a lot of compost. I won't say a little bit because I compost the absolute heck out of my garden, and a couple of other fertilizers that we will talk about that are natural to my garden. So, you know, just really focus on when you're thinking about putting your garden together, what is the most common sense thing that might be going on with your garden, and do that first before doing anything else. But they are greening up so nicely. All of these are new green leaves, and you can hardly even tell that underneath them there are sun-skulled. It was 105 and we had no shade cloth leaves. But this isn't a fungus, guys. It's just a really wicked sunburn. So just give it a little bit of shade, give it some water, and give it some love and some time. So my pepper plants over here are doing really, really well. I'm gonna come in and pull that pepper because I think it's gonna be nice and hot. It's a jalapeno, and that's what I'm gonna use for the salsa with those tomatoes. And then now you can see that it's growing a couple of new buds on it. This one has already started flowering, and the one over here is really growing in peppers nicely. That one is a cayenne pepper that I'm going to let all their peppers turn red so I can dry. Back there we have the mint and the lemon balm. They're coming back in nicely, and a random little parsley over there too as well. This table has become like my little workstation, but on here I also have some Aunt Mollies that are doing really, really well. They're underneath an umbrella, but they get sun coming from this way that has really made them come in nicely, which is a difference from the other Aunt Mollies I showed you guys earlier on in the video. But I'm excited to see what these do. And I have a chamomile that's not liking the full sun at all right behind it. So up on here I did pull all of the eggplant, so I'm gonna fertilize this one and let it kind of get its rejuvenation back going on. And then my sage is still doing really well. This is the one that I pulled up from my garden and put in a plant. It's starting to grow, or put in a pot, sorry guys. It's starting to grow a lot more new leaves. And this store-bought basil from the produce section is starting to do a lot better too as well. Store-bought basil hates being transplanted. It usually dies off and it just gets like all types of craziness going on. As you guys can see, those leaves are bad. But if you give it a little bit of love, it will start producing new leaves, and those do well. So since my family goes through basil like socks, I always start my garden off with the basil that I plant from seed, and I don't have a lot of room inside to start a lot of plants, but when we get to the point to where everybody wants a caprese salad, friends come over and want caprese salad, we have caprese salad every night with dinner, we make spaghettis and pastas and different things like that, and we just really need basil, and we need a lot of basil, then I get the actual plants from the produce section where they're huge and full, and at that moment I can trim it pretty much all the way down and use all the basil for what dish that I need. And then I just take that plant and pot it somewhere in my garden. Either pot it in a pot or pot it in a bed and allow it to grow. Now it hates being transplanted. When they say on the side, this plant does not like to be transplanted, it does not like it. Like, there's tons of basil plants piled in there, so it's already not like, the root situation is not the healthiest situation, but if you give it a little tender loving care, it'll grow back. And sometimes you have to prune it back a little bit to get rid of some of the extra plants in there, but it'll continue to grow, guys. So don't forget, don't get those little packages, because those are a ripoff, when you can get a full plant for like $3 that you can then plant and it'll continue to give you basil. So by the end of the summer, we're gonna have so much basil that I'll be able to dry it, we'll be sick of eating it, and I will have all these plants versus going back and not having enough basil for a recipe and getting those little packages. So I am actually going to water this lovely garden, and I am going to see you guys later for now, and see you guys in part 2, which will be tomorrow for you guys and just later on today for me. But until next time, grow yourselves a garden, because even a small space can provide you with tons of food. Bye guys.